The gleaming research vessel Stellar Wisdom hung in low Earth orbit like a crystalline snowflake, its transparent hull reflecting the azure planet below. Ambassador Nyx'tar stood at the observation deck, 3 pairs of violet eyes fixed on the vast oceans that dominated the world's surface. Their iridescent scales shifted from deep purple to midnight blue as they fought to maintain a diplomatic posture. Another primitive aquatic world, Nyx'tar announced to the assembled science team, mandibles clicking in barely concealed disdain. The Galactic Council sends us to evaluate yet another Class 3 planet with basic marine life. This is beneath the dignity of the Axlorian Science Academy. Lead researcher Kaz Tool approached with a digital readout hovering before her 4-fingered hands. Ambassador, preliminary scans show significant biodiversity in their oceans. Several species display pack hunting behaviors and pack hunting. Nyx'tar interrupted with a musical laugh that echoed through the chamber. My dear Kaz Tool, I've seen pack hunting on 1,000 worlds. A few fish coordinating to catch smaller fish is hardly worthy of our attention. The younger researcher's antenna drooped slightly, but she persisted. With respect, Ambassador, some of these creatures show remarkable. What's remarkable, Nyx'tar cut in again, moving closer to the transparent hull, is that the Council continues to waste our resources on these backwater planets. Look at their vessels. They gestured to a cargo ship passing below. Primitive metal constructs that barely managed to stay afloat. The most advanced aquatic life forms on our world had developed gravitational manipulation before they even reached sentience. The science team exchanged uncertain glances as their leader continued the condescending monologue. Through the hull, Earth's oceans sparkled with deceptive tranquility, hiding secrets that would soon shatter the ambassador's preconceptions. Schedule the preliminary contact meeting with their representatives, Nyx'tar commanded, already turning away from the view. Let's complete this evaluation quickly. I want our findings submitted to the Council by the end of their solar rotation. Standard classification: primitive aquatic biosphere, minimal technological development, no significant predatory evolution. As the ambassador swept from the chamber, Kaz Tool looked down at her readings again, particularly at the unusual patterns they detected in the cold waters near the poles. She input a quick note: further investigation recommended. Unusual coordinated movement patterns detected among large marine mammals. The note would later prove to be the understatement of the century. The conference room aboard the United Earth Naval Station Pacific Crown buzzed with nervous energy as Captain Alexandra Stone waited for the alien delegation. Her weathered features remained carefully neutral, though her green eyes sparkled with barely suppressed amusement. After 20 years commanding vessels in Earth's oceans, she knew exactly what was coming. The doors hissed open, revealing Ambassador Nyx'tar in full diplomatic regalia, their crystalline robes catching the light in rainbow cascades. 3 junior scientists trailed behind, including Kaz Tool, who clutched her datapad like a lifeline. Captain Stone, Nyx'tar's translator, rendered their musical tones into crisp English. How kind of your primitive, excuse me, your developing world to host us. We trust this evaluation will be brief and productive. Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Stone replied, her voice carrying the calm assurance of someone who had faced down far more intimidating creatures than a condescending alien. We're honored to share our oceans with you. Nyx'tar's mandibles twitched in what the humans would learn was their species' equivalent of an indulgent smile. Yes, your oceans. We've reviewed the preliminary data. Quite basic, really, though your attempt at aquatic vessels is charming. Stone's lip quirked slightly. Basic? How so? Well. The ambassador settled into a hover chair, scales shifting to a satisfied golden hue. Take your military vessels, for instance. Simple metal constructs, vulnerable to even the mildest ocean pressures. Our deep swimmer-class vessels can navigate any depth using gravitational displacement fields. Nothing in your oceans could possibly threaten them. Nothing. Stone raised an eyebrow, tapping her tablet. Have you encountered our orcas yet? Kaz Tool's antenna perked up, but Nyx'tar waved a dismissive hand. Ah yes, your large marine mammals. Pack hunters, correct? We have similar creatures on 1,000 worlds, though ours developed basic tool use millions of years ago. Stone's smile widened fractionally. Tool use. Interesting. And how do your creatures handle pod coordination? Multi-generational hunting strategies? Social learning? I hardly see how that's relevant, Nyx'tar replied, though their scales flickered briefly to an uncertain purple. These are simple predators we're discussing. Simple Stone pulled up a holovid. Perhaps you'd be interested in observing one of our research vessels? We're tracking a pod near the Antarctic waters. They're hunting. If you insist, Nyx'tar sighed dramatically, though I failed to see what could possibly. The ambassador's voice trailed off as the footage began to play. Their violet eyes widened incrementally, mandibles going still. What are they doing? Kaz whispered, antenna rigid with attention. Making waves, Stone replied casually, as if she wasn't showing them footage of a coordinated orca pod creating precisely calculated swells to wash a seal off an ice floe. They teach these techniques to their young, pass them down through generations. Each pod has their own hunting culture, their own strategies. Fascinating, Kaz breathed, while Nyx'tar's scales had taken on a distinctly grayish tinge. Oh, this is nothing, Stone continued, her smile now unmistakable. Wait until you see what they do to great white sharks, or how they handle blue whales. Would you like to observe a pod up close? We could arrange a demonstration with one of your, what did you call them, deep swimmer class vessels. For the first time since their arrival, Ambassador Nyx'tar looked distinctly uncomfortable. Perhaps we should review more data first. Of course, Stone agreed smoothly, catching Kaz eye with a knowing look. Take all the time you need. Earth's oceans are full of surprises. As the alien delegation filed out, Stone could have sworn she heard the ambassador muttering something about requesting additional security protocols. Her smile grew wider. They had no idea what they were in for. The deep swimmer class vessel Aquatic Serenity glided through the Antarctic waters, its crystalline hull gleaming beneath the pale polar sun. Ambassador Nyx'tar stood at the observation deck, trying to project confidence despite their scales having shifted to an anxious pale green. Receiving pod signatures, Kaz announced, her antenna twitching as she monitored the sensors. 7 individuals approaching from the northwest. Speed that can't be right. She rechecked her instruments. They're moving at 40 kilometers per hour. Impossible, Nyx'tar scoffed, but their voice wavered slightly. No aquatic creature of that size could maintain such velocity without artificial propulsion. Captain Stone's voice crackled over the comm system from the nearby human vessel. That would be the juveniles of the pod. The adults are still in hunting formation below. Watch your ventral sensors. The alien crew rushed to their stations as dark shapes materialized from the depths. The orcas moved with impossible grace, their massive bodies cutting through the water with devastating precision. The pod's matriarch, nearly 7 meters long, led the formation. By the cosmic core, one of the junior scientists whispered. The coordination patterns they're communicating in real time. Multiple attack vectors, synchronized movements. Just like the human footage showed, Kaz added, her scientific detachment warring with growing excitement, but seeing it in person. The pod suddenly split into 3 groups, executing a maneuver that seemed to defy physics. The juveniles herded a school of fish toward the surface while the adults dove deeper, their echolocation clicks vibrating through the alien vessel's hull. Fascinating hunting strategy, Nyx'tar managed, trying to maintain their diplomatic composure, though hardly what I'd call advanced. Their words died as the matriarch breached the surface, her entire body clearing the water in a display of raw power that sent tremors through the observation deck. Water cascaded off her black and white form as she crashed back down, the impact creating a pressure wave that rocked the allegedly unsinkable alien craft. That was just a greeting. Stone's amused voice came through again. Wait until they show you how they handle larger prey. As if on cue, the pod reorganized. Their movements became sharper, more focused. The aliens watched in growing horror as the orcas demonstrated hunting techniques that spoke of not just intelligence, but generational learning and strategic thinking. The juveniles created precise waves to wash seals off ice floes, while the adults coordinated below to catch their falling prey. 2 orcas demonstrated their carousel feeding technique, herding fish into a tight ball with curtains of bubbles before taking turns charging through the concentrated mass. The acoustic coordination, Kaz muttered, recording frantically. Each pod member knows their role. They're adapting their tactics in real time based on prey response. This isn't just instinct, this is culture. Stone finished for her. Each pod has their own hunting traditions, passed down through generations. Some specialize in sharks, others in whales. They teach their young different techniques depending on their preferred prey. The demonstration reached its crescendo as the pod showed why they were called whale killers. Moving with choreographed precision, they coordinated a mock attack run on a nearby whale, breaking off at the last moment, but showing exactly how they could exhaust and overwhelm prey many times their size. Ambassador Nyx'tar's scales had shifted to a sickly gray-white, and you say these creatures are found in all of Earth's oceans. Oh yes, Stone replied cheerfully. From pole to pole, they're quite adaptable. Some pods even specialize in hunting your kind of vessels. Our vessel's Nyx'tar's voice jumped an octave. They're quite curious about submarine technology. Love to investigate new designs. Sometimes playfully, sometimes, well, let's just say we've learned to give them a wide berth when they're in a mood. As if to emphasize her point, the matriarch turned her massive head toward the alien vessel, her eye fixing on the observation deck with unsettling intelligence. She let out a series of clicks that vibrated through the hull, and the entire pod turned to face them. Don't worry, Stone assured them, though her voice carried a hint of mischief. They're just saying hello. Unless you'd like to see how they disable propulsion systems. They've developed quite a knack for it over the years. That won't be necessary, Nyx'tar practically shouted, their translator struggling to keep up with their agitated tones. I believe we've seen quite enough for one day. Pilot, plot a course back to the station. Maximum safe speed. As the aquatic Serenity retreated, they could have sworn they heard something like laughter through the hull, though whether it came from the humans or the Orcas, no one dared to ask. Back aboard the Stellar Wisdom. Kaztool's research laboratory had transformed into what the humans would call a war room. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing footage of orca behaviors from across Earth's oceans. Ambassador Nyx'tar stood in the center, their scales shifting between shades of blue as they absorbed the disturbing data. Play the Norwegian coast footage again, Nyx'tar commanded, mandibles clicking nervously. The display shifted to show a pod of orcas executing their carousel feeding technique. Notice how they trap the herring with bubble nets. Each pod member maintains their position with perfect precision. That's nothing, Kaztool responded, pulling up another recording. Watch this footage from New Zealand. The pod creates a synchronized wave to wash seals off ice floes. They calculate the exact force needed, adjusting for ice thickness and prey weight. Some pods even teach their young to beach themselves temporarily to snatch seals from the shore. The ambassador's scales rippled with disbelief. Voluntary beaching? They risk their own safety for more efficient hunting. Risk is minimal, Ambassador. They've perfected the technique over generations. Kaztool's antenna quivered with excitement as she brought up more data. Each pod has distinct vocal dialects, passed down through matrilineal lines. They maintain complex social structures, with some family groups staying together for lifetimes. The displays shifted again, showing a massive pod taking down a blue whale. Nyx'tar watched in horrified fascination as the orcas coordinated their assault, some distracting the whale while others dove beneath to strike from below. Their problem-solving abilities are remarkable, a junior researcher added, pulling up historical records. In 1977, they learned to flip over great white sharks to induce tonic immobility. Within a decade, multiple pods across different oceans had adopted the technique. They share knowledge between groups. Nyx'tar's scales paled. And you're saying they've developed strategies specifically for vessels? Oh yes, Kaztool brought up a new series of incidents. They've learned to identify different ship types, targeting specific parts of the vessels. Some pods specialize in disabling rudders, others in removing fishing nets without tangling themselves. There's even documentation of them cooperatively hunting alongside human whalers in the past, though they eventually turned against the hunting vessels. The ambassador sank into their hover chair, processing the implications. So they can distinguish friend from foe, adapt their strategies, and pass this knowledge to future generations. Correct. And that's not all. Kaztool's voice dropped lower. We've analyzed their brain structure, their limbic system, their capacity for emotional processing. Ambassador, they're not just hunters. They're capable of complex emotional states, cultural learning, and possibly even what humans call revenge. The displays now showed a pod systematically dismantling a fishing vessel's equipment, their movements deliberate and coordinated. The ambassador watched as the Orcas took turns keeping the crew distracted while others worked to disable the ship's propulsion. "Update the classification report," Nyx'tar ordered, their voice carrying new respect and more than a little fear. "Earth's oceans are to be designated as a Class 1 hazard zone. Note specifically that all Axlorian vessels must maintain a safety buffer of at least 5 kilometers from any identified Orca pod." "Should I include the incident reports of them disabling nuclear submarines?" Kaz asked innocently. "Nuclear? Never mind. I don't want to know." The ambassador straightened their robes. "Mark Earth's marine predators as evolutionarily advanced with particular emphasis on cooperative hunting behaviors. And Kaz, schedule a meeting with the human representatives. I believe we need to revise our initial assessment of their world's development level." As the research team continued their analysis, a ping from the surface monitoring system caught their attention. A pod of Orcas had been spotted near their original landing site, appearing to study the energy signatures of their vessels with unsettling thoroughness. The transport vessel Crystal Dawn pierced through Earth's atmosphere, its hull radiating prismatic light as it descended toward the Pacific Ocean. Despite Ambassador Nyx'tar's warnings, the ship's captain, Reslor, had insisted on taking a more direct route to their underwater research station. After all, what harm could mere marine life do to advanced Axlorian technology? Scanning local waters, the sensor operator announced, "No signs of large marine life within 5 kilometers. Wait." Their antenna stiffened. "Multiple contacts just appeared on our scanners. They were hiding in a thermal layer." Reslor's scales flickered with irritation. "Impossible. Our sensors can penetrate any natural camouflage." The captain strode to the monitoring station, then froze. On the display, 12 distinct signatures moved in perfect formation, emerging from varying depths like ghosts from the deep. "Pod approaching from 3 vectors," the operator reported, their voice rising. "Speed 45 kilometers per hour and accelerating. They're coordinating through subsonic frequencies." The first impact rocked the Crystal Dawn before anyone could react. An adult Orca had launched itself against the vessel's port stabilizer, testing the shield's strength. 2 more struck the starboard side simultaneously, their attacks synchronized with frightening precision. "Shields holding at 90%, engineering reported. But they're not trying to break through. They're analyzing our defensive patterns." Captain Reslor's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Engage emergency protocols. Full power to propulsion." The Crystal Dawn surged forward, but the Orcas matched their speed effortlessly. The pod split into 3 groups, each taking positions that boxed the vessel into an ever-tightening corridor of movement. Every time the ship tried to change course, precisely aimed waves from breaching Orcas forced them back on track. "They're hurting us," the navigation officer realized with horror. "Like we're nothing more than a seal on an ice floe." The pod's matriarch, a scarred giant nearly 8 meters long, breached directly in front of the ship. As she crashed back into the water, the impact created a pressure wave that sent the Crystal Dawn into a spiral. Warning signals blared as water pressure increased rapidly. "We're being forced deeper," engineering shouted. "Shields failing at multiple points. They're targeting the same spots with each pass." "Send a distress signal," Reslor ordered, scales now a sickly white. "Any human vessels in range, tell them." Another coordinated strike cut off their words. 3 juveniles had positioned themselves beneath the ship, using their echolocation to create a resonance frequency that made the Crystal Dawn's hull vibrate dangerously. Just as the shields prepared to fail, a powerful broadcast cut through the water. A series of clicks, whistles, and deep sonic pulses echoed through the ocean. The attacking pod paused their assault. "This is Captain Stone of the UN Pacific Guardian," a human voice crackled through the comm system. "Hold position and power down non-essential systems. We're approaching your location." The sleek form of a human vessel appeared, moving with surprising grace through the troubled waters. More sonic pulses emanated from its hull, complex patterns that seemed to be communicating directly with the Orca pod. "Fascinating," the sensor operator whispered. "The humans are using modified Orca vocalizations. They're speaking their language." The pod's matriarch responded with a series of clicks, then slowly backed away from the Crystal Dawn. The other Orcas maintained their positions but ceased their attacks. Axlorian vessel Stone's voice came through again, now tinged with amusement. "You strayed into their hunting grounds during training season. This pod specializes in disabling large vessels. They were actually being quite gentle with you. Gentle Res Lore's translator squeaked. They nearly breached our hull. If they wanted to breach your hull, you'd be on the ocean floor by now, Stone replied matter-of-factly. They were just teaching their young how to handle unknown vessels. Consider it a compliment. They found your ship interesting enough for a training exercise. As if to emphasize her point, the matriarch breached once more, this time in what appeared to be a more playful display. Several juveniles copied her movement, creating a cascade of splashes around both ships. We'll escort you to safe waters, Stone offered. But in the future, please follow established shipping lanes and maintain the recommended distance from identified pods. Some of them can hold a grudge, and they have excellent memory. The Crystal Dawn's crew watched in stunned silence as the human vessel began guiding them to safety, the Orca pod following at a distance like curious observers. From that day forward, not a single Axlorian ship ever questioned the warnings about Earth's oceans again. One standard Earth month later, Ambassador Nyx'tar stood before the Galactic Council, their scales a thoughtful shade of blue-green as they presented their final report. Distinguished council members, they began, mandibles clicking formally. I move to officially reclassify Earth's oceans as a Class 1 restricted zone, with mandatory safety protocols for all visiting vessels. The council chamber erupted in surprised whispers. An elder counselor leaned forward, their crystalline form catching the light. Ambassador, just last cycle you classified Earth as a primitive aquatic world. What prompted such a dramatic reassessment? Nyx'tar gestured, and a holographic display materialized, showing footage of Orcas in action. What we initially dismissed as simple marine predators are, in fact, one of the most sophisticated hunter species we've encountered. They possess generational knowledge transfer, advanced problem-solving abilities, and they paused dramatically, a disturbing interest in disabling our vessels. The footage shifted to show the Crystal Dawn incident. Several council members' scales shifted to pale yellow in alarm. The humans Nyx'tar continued, have learned to coexist with these creatures, even developed ways to communicate with them. While we were busy dismissing Earth as primitive, they were forming partnerships with some of the most intelligent predators in the galaxy. Captain Stone, invited as Earth's representative, stood at the back of the chamber, trying not to smile too obviously. Furthermore, Nyx'tar added, I recommend immediate funding for protective modifications to all Axlorian vessels. The Orcas have already learned to identify our shield frequencies. They seem to view our ships as interesting toys. Toys, a counselor asked weakly. Indeed. The pod that disabled the Crystal Dawn was apparently just conducting a training exercise. Teaching their young how to handle unknown vessels. Nyx'tar's scales rippled. They were being gentle. The council chamber fell silent as this information sank in. Finally, the head counselor spoke. Motion carried. Earth's oceans will be reclassified. Ambassador Nyx'tar, you will oversee the implementation of new safety protocols. As the session concluded, Nyx'tar approached Captain Stone. Your world has taught us a valuable lesson about underestimating the unknown. Stone nodded, green eyes twinkling. The Orcas teach everyone that lesson eventually, though most learn it from a safer distance. True, Nyx'tar agreed, their scales shifting to match the blue of Earth's oceans. Though I admit, I'm curious about these sharks your people mentioned. Perhaps during our next visit. One apex predator at a time, Ambassador Stone laughed. One apex predator at a time. In the waters far below, a pod of Orcas breached the waves in perfect synchronization, their splashes creating patterns that looked suspiciously like laughter.